Conditions May Apply by CinnamonPinecones. Read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 181. Knowing Your Limits and Pressing Your Luck. Hitoshi was asleep with their head on his chest when Shota got the call he'd been eagerly anticipating and dreading in equal measure. Incoming call from Nedzu. He woke Hitoshi up trying to shuffle away. They didn't ask any questions. They probably knew this was coming too. Shota stepped into the bathroom to answer the call in private. We've gotten confirmation from Hawks that the students are alive in a nearby secondary location, Nedzu informed him. Shota could have wept for joy. The burned man, his name is Dabi. He appears to be working with us for the time being, he continued. That's great. Where are they? He stumbled over his words. Nedzu ignored his question. You told a civilian classified information and had her tail a highly dangerous criminal for hours, Nedzu stated plainly. It was only a phone call, but he could feel the disappointment radiating through the tinny speaker. I didn't technically tell her anything, and I specifically told her not to get involved, he argued. And yet, Nedzu pressed. He didn't have an argument for that. He knew it was foolish, but it got results. He would do it again, and he knew EY would too. You're compromised, Nedzu pointed out. Shota's heart dropped to his stomach. If you try to take me off this case, I'm not trying to take you off this case. I am taking you off this case, Nedzu interrupted him. Nedzu, these are my students. Precisely why you are being removed. You've raised your voice at me. You're not being rational. What happens if you get yourself killed trying to get them back? How will that affect your charge? I can't just do nothing, he insisted, not bothering to try to rein in his volume any longer. You've already done more than enough, more than you should have. You still have a role to play. Report back to Mustafa. You will be speaking at the press release, Nedzu informed calmly. I'm not leaving Camino until he's safe. And why the hell would you want me talking to the press? He balked. You're their homeroom teacher, Aizawa. The public will want answers, and if they don't come from you, there will be even more questions. We will have Hawks on hand to get you back to Camino when we extract the students. Shota had to pause to take a deep breath because he was about to scream if Nedzu expressed one more stupid-ass plan. Why the hell would you not have Hawks there helping? He asked at a reasonable volume, his tone brittle and ready to snap at a moment's notice. Hawks has started a rapport with Dabi. The commission doesn't want him helping with the raid. It would tarnish his standing should we need to send him undercover later. You're going to pull 2 valuable players off the board and risk those kids' lives on a couple of what-ifs? We have All Might, Endeavor, Best Jeanist, Edgeshot, and many other highly qualified heroes on the task force. And what if that's not enough? What if something happens that I could have stopped, but I'm not there? What if one of those kids dies? What then? 'Cause that'll be on your hands, he asked, his tone changing from flat to downright frigid. I am well aware of that, Shota, Nedzu replied. The line went quiet for a tense moment. Shota realized he was gripping the phone tight enough to hurt, so he forced his hand to relax and tried to calm himself. I've weighed all the possibilities. This is our best shot. The commission is trusting me with this, and I need you to do the same. Nedzu spoke up again. Shota had half a mind to tell him to shove it where the sun don't shine, but he realized before he even spoke a word that he was at a breaking point. He didn't have anything else to say to the rat, so he hung up before a broken noise pushed itself out of his throat. He let his phone clatter into the bathroom sink, and he let himself slide down to the floor. He heard the door open, but he didn't look up. He knew it was Hitoshi. "I take it that didn't go well?" they asked. His eyes were too dry to cry, but his chest was seizing up all the same. He hadn't let himself breathe for more than a few seconds in damn near 15 hours. He was exhausted, and the breakdown he'd been pushing back was rearing its ugly head for a third time. He had heard Hitoshi crying last night while they failed miserably at trying to get some rest after the fruitful fiasco with Hawks and Iwai. He didn't say anything then because he knew if he did, he would break down too, so he just held them until they fell asleep. That was about 4 hours ago now. "Baby, come back to bed." Zashi tried to coax him away from where he was curled in on himself, his back pressed against the cabinets under the sink. "They found him, and he won't tell me where. Sending me back to UA for a damn press conference," he choked out, his voice just as unsteady as he feared it would be. Hitoshi sighed, but he didn't disagree with Nezu's decision. Shota knew they were right. They'd known him since he was Izuku's age. They knew he would get himself killed for even the barest chance of getting those kids home safe. They were right, but he felt like a caged animal regardless. He let himself be unreasonable for 5 minutes. He sat on the bathroom floor in Hitoshi's arms and did something adjacent to crying, but when he judged that about 5 minutes had passed, he got up and went to bed. He didn't sleep, but he tried to. He closed his eyes and rested for a few hours while Hitoshi tapped away on his phone. If he needed to be updated on anything, they'd let him know. Hitoshi was going to get in so much flipping trouble. They were all going to get in so much flipping trouble. Kirishima overheard that Yaoyorozu had tracked a Nomu, and the two of them had literally begged her to make them another receiver for the signal so they could track it too. He was honestly a few minutes away from saying screw it and brainwashing her, but thankfully she gave in without him having to betray her like that. He would have done it. He really would have. He would have done it in front of the whole class. He wondered what that said about him. But Izuku was gone, and he wasn't going to concern himself with consequences until they got him home safe. He had let him slip through his fingers too many times now. He was useless at the USJ. He was benched during whatever the hell happened in Hosu, and he couldn't do a damn thing to save him this time. Hitoshi never would have gotten into UA without him, and he never would have made a friend without him. He would have died at the USJ without him, and he's done nothing to repay those debts. He was not going to leave Izuku hanging again. It wasn't difficult to get Todoroki and Uraraka to agree to come with them, but he was surprised when Ida didn't hesitate either. He had a determined glint in his eye, and a look of understanding passed between him and Todoroki. He assumed it had to do with whatever happened with them in Hosu, but as long as they weren't going to stop him, he didn't care what their reasons were. UA paid to house families in a nearby hotel for the night since it was past 2 a.m. by the time the first parent showed up. His mom didn't turn up until nearly 4 a.m., and she stayed with them in the hospital until the last student was either reunited with their family, or in the case of Uraraka, Ida, and Todoroki, staying in the hotel with her and Hitoshi. Uraraka's parents were way down south. Ida's parents didn't really seem to give two craps about him, and Endeavor was similarly busy. So the Shinso family ended up with 3 more kids for the night. The setup worked out well for their plans. Kirishima's house wasn't far, and Yaoyorozu was staying in the hospital for the night. Despite his reluctance, they all agreed to rest as much as they could and mobilize the next day. or more likely, night, seeing as though they didn't get to the hotel until 5 a.m., and it would be foolish to try and execute a stealth mission in the light of day. None of them spoke past necessities after leaving the hospital. Everyone was exhausted. He could tell his mom wasn't letting herself feel any of it, and as angry as he wanted to be about that, he wasn't. He was just jealous. Jealous that she didn't have to feel like this, though he knew that wasn't entirely true. She could feel everything they were feeling, but she had described it as like watching a particularly compelling film once when he'd asked. She still felt it, but she knew that the feelings weren't hers. They were removed from her in a way, especially when she didn't allow herself to feel her own empathy. He knew he should smush down the feelings of jealousy for her sake, but he knew that if he did, then his manic determination to save his friend would have nothing to hide behind. She wasn't a mind reader, but she'd had this power and known him long enough to be able to put the pieces together. He couldn't let her stop them, so he focused on his jealousy and guilt and wallowed in it until sleep finally sank its claws into him. Everyone slept in until noon, or at least most people still looked groggy enough to have gotten up recently when Hitoshi rolled out of bed at 12:18. His mom had been up long enough to have picked up food for everyone, though. The room was somber and silent as they ate. Uraraka had turned the TV onto the news on mute, but nothing had been reported yet. It felt strange to see someone report on the weather and other banal topics when his world had been so thoroughly turned on its head. Uraraka's parents' train had been delayed due to flooding, and they weren't going to make it to Kamino until tomorrow morning, which worked out well for their plans. Hitoshi tried not to think too deeply about tomorrow, though. He did his best to focus on tonight. They were going to get Izuku back tonight, and whatever happened between now and then was just a distraction. They'd all agreed to meet at sundown, which at this point in the season wasn't until 8:30 at night. The minutes between trickled down the hourglass at a snail's pace, but eventually the time came. He sent a knowing nod to his friends before he turned to his mother and did his damnedest to keep the guilt off his face as he spoke. Not that it really mattered in the end. "Hey, Mom," he called her attention. She was sitting on her bed with a book she'd picked up at the corner store, but her attention flicked up to him quickly. She looked concerned, no doubt feeling the immense guilt crushing him for what he was about to do. "What?" He didn't let her finish the first word before grabbing hold of her mind. "Go to sleep," he ordered with a grimace. She did as he commanded, and he didn't look his friends in the eyes as he carefully draped the blanket over her. They left quietly, without a word. "Is she going to stay asleep?" Uraraka asked tentatively as they walked. "She'll be asleep until we're far enough away. After that, well, she'd have to will herself to wake up, so I don't know." He forced out an answer painfully. He scrubbed a tear off his cheek and hoped no one saw. If the look Uraraka gave him when they made it to the rendezvous point was any indication, he'd say his emotional lapse didn't go as unnoticed as he'd hoped. She grabbed his hand and squeezed it with 4 fingers, but she didn't say anything. They all just waited in silence in front of the hospital until Yayorozu joined them. "Is Kirishima coming?" she asked quietly, respectful of the somber air surrounding them. "Yes, he should be here soon," Todoroki answered her. "The signal hasn't moved. It's still at a warehouse in Kamino Ward," she updated them. "We're going to need disguises. I have been recognized from the sports festival several times." Ida spoke up with a slight blush on his cheeks. Yeah, Hitoshi would be a bit embarrassed to be remembered for what that crazy support girl put him through, too. "I agree. Todoroki's going to need a wig or a hat. That hair is too unique. Kirishima, too, probably." Yorozu concurred. Hitoshi let himself space out as they talked. No one knew who he was, so he didn't need to bother with it. He tried not to think about what he'd just done and what he was about to do, but it was of no use. He'd never used his quirk like that on purpose. Not against someone he loved. Not against someone innocent. He felt like the villain everyone had always assumed him to be. Even if his mother forgave him, she would always know that he was capable of doing this again. He would do that to her again if he had to, and that made him sick. His guilt was compounded by his lack of sufficient guilt, but he did his best to shove that to the back of his mind when Kirishima finally joined them. Shota felt nauseous for the whole train ride back to Mustafu. Every mile that stretched between him and Izuku weighed on his chest. He felt so damn useless. He was too tired to notice the extra pair of shoes in the Genkan, and he was very resolutely not looking toward Izuku's room as he made his way through the apartment. So he nearly jumped out of his skin when he heard a voice addressing him. "So, I see you've adopted a stray again. How many times are you going to neglect to inform me that I'm an aunt now?" Nimori greeted him playfully from the couch behind him. He still hadn't slept, and he knew he looked it. He regarded her silently. She was sitting on the couch in civilian attire with Bastard purring on her lap. She was the only person that damn cat seemed to respect, so she'd been their go-to cat sitter for a while. His eyes flicked away from her for a moment to see the door to Izuku's room wide open, and he didn't bother trying to hold back a sigh. "What's going on, Shota?" she asked more gently when she saw the state he was in. "Nedzu already informed." "I don't mean with your work kids. I mean your kid. I assume this is what you and Zashi have been hiding?" She cut off his bullshit response. "All you had to do was feed the cats, Nem." He replied wearily. "I had patrol. I was just going to take a nap. For once, I wasn't actually trying to snoop." She defended herself. "Did you go through his shit? Because he'll notice if you did. And I'm not going to cover I didn't do anything. Cross my heart." She interrupted his lecture. He knew she had questions, but he didn't have the energy to deal with this right now. "I need to get dressed." He attempted to change the subject. "You need to take a shower and shave. Looking that haggard might gain you sympathy points, but it won't reassure anyone that we have this under control," she countered, thankfully taking his lead in the conversation for once. "I assume Nedzu sent you," he surmised. "Yes, he sent the suit on the bed as well," she answered. "I have a suit. The one you wore to your wedding doesn't count. Go get decent. I'll be waiting here for hair and makeup. The less recognizable you are, the better, and you know it, so don't argue." She steamrolled over the complaints that he didn't even have time to form. He felt his eye twitch, but he knew she was right, so he kept his mouth shut. 20 minutes later saw him sitting on the couch as Nem prodded at the bags under his eyes with a wet sponge. Covering the scar was a lost cause, but she'd certainly lessened its presence. He looked about 5 years younger than he usually did, and he's not sure that was really going to help his ethos in front of the press. But he didn't mention it. Nem had been blessedly silent since he returned to the living room, and he wasn't keen on tempting that. Of course, it was only a matter of time before she addressed the elephant in the room. "So, is the kid with Zashi's family now, or—" She trailed off, leaving him to fill in the blanks. There was no point in lying to her, so he didn't bother try. "No," he answered plainly. Her face twisted up painfully. She wasn't stupid. He knew she must have put the pieces together. He knew for a fact that all of the textbooks UA assigned their students were stacked up on the bookshelf right next to Izuku's door. Whether she'd been snooping or not, it wouldn't be difficult to come to the right conclusion. Oh, Sho, she cooed at him, brushing her palm over his smooth cheek. Her face only crumpled more when he allowed this show of affection. The room lapsed into silence again as she finished up whatever she was doing to his face with a big powder puff. She was standing behind him, pulling his still damp hair into a braid when she spoke again. Midoriya, I'm guessing? Yes. She finished his hair in silence and helped him into his suit jacket. She straightened his tie and smoothed out the non-existent creases on his sleeves before catching his eye with a look of determination. They're going to get him back. Both of them. They're going to be okay, she said with conviction. He pressed his lips into a fine line and nodded, because there wasn't anything else he could do but believe her. There were only a few hours until the press conference would be over with, and the task force Nedzu had pulled together would strike right after that. Izuku would be home soon. His students would be safe. This was going to end tonight. End of chapter.